Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by Bajirao IAS Academy. Today is 27th July 2024 and we have some important articles for the discussion. So we'll discuss all these important articles one by one, and without any further delay, let's start our discussion and we'll try to understand all important articles that were covered in the Hindu and Indian Express newspapers. And before actually discussing them, let's try to solve one practice question that I have given to you yesterday. And this question is from Indian polity, and this is also a very important question because Article 142 is very often in news. Right, so Article 142 of the Indian Constitution sometimes seen in news, and it is related to which of the following things? And the correct answer for this question is option B. Right, so measures by the Supreme Court of India, so to do complete justice. So whenever there is any appeal, any petition which is being filed in the Supreme Court, Indian Constitution has actually given the power to the Supreme Court to do complete justice in certain matters or measures that are being taken by the Supreme Court to do complete justice. So correct answer for this question is option B, and you can also go through this explanation. The explanation is a very brief and clear. Article 142 of the Indian Constitution deals with the enforcement of decrees and orders of the Supreme Court, and in fact, so it may be the Supreme Court may pass an order for doing complete justice in any matter, so that particular matter is pending before the Supreme Court. So that is Article 142 of the Indian Constitution. And today we have a map based question, and Myanmar also constantly in news, right? So Myanmar is constantly in news because the civil war like situation and military regime has actually taken over the democratically elected government, and the military regime taken over Myanmar, and because of that reason Myanmar is constantly in news. And apart from that, Myanmar also shares its borders with India. So the question is, which of the following countries borders Myanmar? The options are A, Thailand, 1 Thailand, 2 Laos, 3 Cambodia, and 4 China. So you just have to identify that which of the following countries Myanmar actually shares its borders or boundaries. So select the correct answer code. So try to answer this question because this is also a very simple and easy question, and it is a map based question. So over a period of time the skills in mapping will improve, because in UPSC examination map based questions are actually asked very often. So therefore try to solve this question. And today we have one important mains practice question. The question is with respect to in India's widening current account deficit. So this is also known as CAD, increasing current account deficit of India. The question is, discuss the reasons for India's high current account deficit and also suggest ways to address the current account deficit. How current account deficit of India could be addressed. Now, structuring and approach of the answer is very important. Now, how can we structure this answer? You can give a brief definition of current account deficit. Right, so in introduction you can briefly define current account deficit, and you could also present some data about India's current account deficit. Now, what is the exact current account deficit of India and what is the meaning of current account deficit? So that is how you can make introduction more and more attractive. And once you write the introduction, then discuss the reasons for high current account deficit, because it is already asked in the question. Discuss the reasons for India's high current account deficit, and then you need to suggest some measures to address it. So this is the second part of the question. First you need to write the reasons for high current account deficit, and in the next part suggest ways. Those ways could reduce the current account deficit of India, and write about the need to boost exports. So when we boost exports, the current account deficit could be reduced, and reduction in the current account deficit will make India's economy more and more competitive over a period of time. So you just emphasize on all those things in the conclusion of the answer. Now, if you look at the answer, so this is how the answer actually should be. India is actually the one of the fastest growing major economies in the world. So there is no doubt about that. We have been growing continuously, consistently, 6.5 to 7%. even during the COVID-19 pandemic also, Indian economy was resilient. We were able to withstand the pandemic, the negative impact of the pandemic. Despite growing at a higher growth rate, India has been facing the persistent current account deficit in recent years. So despite we are registering high economic growth rate in recent years, India has been facing a lot of problems with respect to the current account deficit. So the current account, it actually measures a country's transactions with the rest of the world. So this is the brief definition of the current account deficit, or we can say that if this particular transactions of India with the rest of the world so would be in negative, so it would be negative, then it would be called as current account deficit. For example, imagine that India exports 100 rupee worth of goods and import 150 rupee worth of goods. Now still we have the trade balance of minus 50 rupees. So therefore this is known as the current account deficit, or CAD. And what is current account surplus? Current account surplus. Now when we say current account surplus, India exporting 150 rupee worth of goods and importing just 100 rupee worth of goods. So this is current account surplus and this is current account deficit. Current account actually measures countries' transactions with the rest of the world. In fact, it also reflects a balance of trade of India with the rest of the world, and the total net income and total net transfer payments between India and other parts of the world. And in very simple terms, if we can look into the current account deficit, a high current account deficit actually indicates that a country has been importing more goods than what it exports. So I hope it is very clear for all of you that a high current account deficit actually means that the country has been importing more than what it actually exports. So therefore, relying on foreign capital inflows to finance the deficit. So that actually the current account deficit, and a current account deficit would not be a good sign of healthy economy, right? So therefore it is very important that we must reduce the current account deficit. So current account deficit also indicates that any economy is an import based economy. So we dependent on imports. So this will be an import based economy. Import based economy. So India is also an import based economy if the current account deficit is also, if it is a very high, and that is the case with India. And in the question itself, it is asked, you need to write some reasons for India's high current account deficit. So you need to mention the reasons. So first and foremost reason for high current account deficit is a widening trade deficit for India. Now widening trade deficit in the sense that, so the trade between India and the rest of the world. Now when we talk about the trade, so we are exporting less than importing. For example, whatever we export, that would be lesser than what we import from other countries. So that essentially a difference between exports and imports, and that is the trade balance. And this trade balance or a trade deficit has also been widening in recent years. So specifically due to some reasons. So one reason was increasing crude oil prices. Crude oil prices have increased because of the Russia-Ukraine war, and European economies have been looking, European markets have been looking to purchase oil from Middle East, where India's traditional supplier of oil is Middle East. And apart from that, the gold prices have also substantially increased along with the other commodities. So this is one reason for the widening trade deficit. And in fact, when prices of oil and other imported goods, essential and critical minerals, we also import essential and critical minerals. So when the prices of essential imports increasing, that would further widen the trade deficit of India, and thereby making it very difficult for India to balance its trade with the rest of the world whenever the raw material prices that we import actually rising over a period of time. And apart from that, there is also another reason, that is there is an increase in the non-essential exports. There are number of imports or imported goods which are considered as non-essential. Now, when we are constantly importing the non-essential goods, the number of imports will increase compared to the total exports. So that would also further widen the trade balance between India and rest of the world. So therefore, we have been importing more capital goods and intermediate goods and even the consumer goods, and all these factors have been further pushing the current account deficit or further widening the current account deficit of India. And if you look at the Indian economy, we also import a very less number of goods and services to other countries, and that is also one drawback. One best example is if we look at trade between India and China. So the trade between these two countries amounts to around 110 billion US dollars. So within this 110 billion US dollars, so we actually import from China. The value of total imports from China to India costs around 75 to 80 billion, and the rest of the value of the trade that India exports to China. So you can imagine that there is a huge and wide trade imbalance between India and China. So there is also a trade deficit between India and China. So that is primarily assumed to the low export potential of Indian economy. So India's exports are not that much competitive in the global markets as like China. So India's exports have remained sluggish, or we can say Indian exports have stagnant due to a poor competitiveness or lack of competitiveness in the global market. But on the other hand, Chinese products and products of Southeast Asian nations, they are more competitive, and they are also known as export markets. So a lack of infrastructure investment in India and research and development are the factors which actually makes Indian goods or Indian exports less competitive. So we need to look into this aspect also. So this has actually resulted in a persistent and a continued trade deficit. All these factors that we have discussed, it has led to the trade deficit, and it in turn contributing to the current account deficit. And apart from this, another factor is depreciation of rupee. So when a rupee value depreciates, so it would also widen the current account deficit of India, because the imports will become more and more expensive. So when a rupee value declines, then we need to pay more rupees for an import of $1 value basket of goods. So thereby making imports more and more expensive, and that would lead to the higher current account deficit on the part of the India, and this should also be taken care of. However, if you look at Indian economy, the fiscal deficit is also very high. Fiscal deficit is very high because of the recent pandemic. And recent pandemic, the government has to depend on borrowings from other countries, and that has substantially increased the fiscal deficit in India. So therefore, the fiscal deficit in India has led to a higher current account deficit, and even it has also been to some extent contributing to the widening of trade deficit. So therefore, government has to finance its spending borrowing money from abroad, borrowing money from the multilateral financing agencies, and that further widening the current account deficit. So therefore, we can say that the fiscal deficit also contributing to the current account deficit. However, there are certain ways through which we can address the high current account deficit, because this is the second part of the question and this is also asked. Now, what are those ways through which we can address this current account deficit? So we can boost exports. We should focus on exports. Manufacturing and industries, especially MSMEs, have a lot of potential, lot of export potential. And if we encourage and if we incentivize these MSMEs can actually boost India's exports and make India's products more and more competitive in the international markets. So therefore, the government must take certain steps to boost exports. We need to restructure or right. So we need to restructure our economy so that we could boost exports, and we should also invest in infrastructure, improving business environment, and we should also promote innovation as well. And apart from that, so when we talk about boosting India's exports, So this can be achieved by creating a favorable environment for investments. We need to create a conducive and favorable environment for the investment. So we should also reduce bureaucratic barriers, and we should also provide incentives for exports. More and more incentives for the exports should be provided, and that would incentivize the exports from India to other countries, thereby making India's exports more and more competitive. And we should also encourage the inward investments. So inward investments, encouraging inward investments is also a very important aspect. So the government can actually encourage the inward investment by actually reducing the regulatory burden, and at the same time we need to provide a stable business environment. So that can be provided by creating a favorable tax regime and improving access to finance and even reducing corruption. So all these measures have to be taken over a period of time, and that would help us in reducing the trade deficit and even the current account deficit as well. And we need to control exports. So whatever non-essential imports that we have been importing, so those non-essential imports should be minimized. So when we minimize these non-essential imports by increasing tariffs, or increasing the import tariffs on those particular non-essential items, so we could reduce those imports into India. And apart from that, the government can also take steps to control imports by promoting domestic production, right? So when we have a substitution of certain products in India itself, so that would prevent the import of other items from other countries. And we should also reduce import tariffs and also encourage the use of local goods and services. So it is not reducing the import tariffs, so you have to write increasing import tariffs. We need to increase the import tariffs, and that would disincentivize the imports. And we need to create a favorable environment for the investment, and that is also a very important. Now when investments are made, with investment the expertise will be coming into India, and the technology will be coming into India, and be making Indian products, Indian goods more and more competitive in the international market. So that substantially enhances India's overall trade balance, right? So we need to reduce the bureaucratic hurdles, red tapeism, and we need to promote innovation as well. So in order to promote innovation, we need to increase investments in research and development. So as of now, India's total investments in research and development, stands at around 0.67% of India's GDP. So therefore it should be substantially increased. And apart from that, we need to encourage savings also. That is very important. Now a multiplier effect. So I hope you knew about the multiplier effect. Now when savings are promoted increasingly, when savings are increasingly promoted, what happens with respect to this particular savings? So investment facilitation in the economy will increase, right? So the government should encourage savings by promoting financial literacy among individuals, and financial inclusion measures should also be undertaken by the government. And the government should also take measures to improve access to finance, thereby providing incentives for savings. And this particular thing can be achieved by creating a favorable environment for investment, and also reducing the bureaucratic barriers and promoting innovation as well. Similarly, we need to increase the energy security of India, and thereby we can reduce our energy import dependence from other countries. Because if you look at India's energy imports, 85% of our total energy needs are met through imports alone. So therefore India needs to reduce its dependence on imported energy. So that will further reduce its import bill, and it will also improve India's overall current account deficit. However, this particular thing can be achieved by increasing domestic energy production and even developing the alternative energy sources. So that could further enhances India's energy efficiency. So overall we can say that in conclusion, you need to emphasize on making India's exports more and more competitive. Now when we make our goods more and more competitive in the international markets, so that would lead to the increasing demand for Indian goods, and that would also narrows down the existing current account deficit. So it is very important to narrow down the current account deficit, and we should also maintain a positive trade balance with the other countries. So that is how you can conclude this this answer, right? So India's current account deficit is actually the result of multiple factors, or combination of multiple factors. So they include widening trade deficit and even low exports that India has been experiencing. However, so in order to address this particular challenge, the government needs to take a multi-pronged approach, and this multi-pronged approach actually involves boost exports, encouraging inward investments, controlling exports, controlling imports, and even encouraging savings. So all these measures have to be undertaken. Now whatever we have discussed in the body part of the answer, you could mention those things in the conclusion. So by taking the above mentioned steps, so India could actually reduce its overall dependence on the foreign capital. India could actually reduce its dependence on the energy imports from other countries, which very often cost India very high, and it would also improve its balance of trade, and it would become more and more stable and sustainable economy in the longer periods of time. So that's how you could conclude this answer. So we'll proceed on to discuss few important articles that were covered in different newspapers, and the first article that we are going to start this discussion with: the Ahom dynasty from Assam make it to the UNESCO World Heritage List. So right, so it is included in the UNESCO World Heritage List. So that is royal burial mound of Ahom dynasty. So, or these royal burial mounds belong to the Ahom dynasty. So these are known as Charadio moidums, right? So Charadio moidums, and this Charadio moidums, which belong to the Ahom dynasty, they are 700-year-old mound burial systems, and they are located in Assam, and they belong to the Ahom dynasty. So Ahom dynasty actually ruled Assam, right? So this Ahom dynasty actually ruled Assam. So therefore it was recently added to the UNESCO World Heritage List on yesterday. Okay, so therefore it will be the 43rd property from India to be included in the prestigious index of UNESCO World Heritage List, and first from the Northeast, particularly a cultural heritage to be part of the UNESCO World Heritage List. So that you should remember. So this particular announcement was made at the 46th session of the World Heritage Committee, and this 46th session of the World Heritage Committee was recently held in New Delhi. And the historic recognition of these moidums, which belong to the 700-year-old mound burial systems, so Ahom kings at Charadio, and they have been highlighting India's rich cultural heritage and cultural heritage of Assam as well. So when we talk about these old mound burial systems belong to the Ahom dynasty in Assam, so they are actually similar to the pyramids in Egypt. So we also see the pyramids in Egypt, right? So pyramids in Egypt are also burial systems within Egypt. Now these moidums are also like pyramids in Egypt. However, these moidums are earthen burial mounds, right? So they are actually earthen burial mounds, and it also the burial mounds of the members of the royal Ahom family. So they actually ruled 600 years in Assam before the British actually take over the region from the Ahom dynasty. However, the Ahoms actually adopted the Hindu method of cremation, right? So in fact they also began entombing these cremated bones and ashes in moidum at Charadio. So apart from that, when we talk about this burial mound systems of Ahom dynasty in Assam, so this will be the first from Northeast, that the moidums are the first from the northeastern states to be recognized as the World Heritage Site in the cultural category. So these are the first systems to be included in the UNESCO's World Heritage Site. And apart from that, one thing that you need to remember is apart from this burial mound systems or moidums from Assam. So earlier, two other sites were also included in the natural category from Assam itself. So those are Kaziranga National Park and even Manas National Park, and they were later upgraded into the tiger reserves. In fact, Kaziranga National Park and Manas National Park were included in the UNESCO World Heritage list, but they belong to the natural category, but these moidums belong to the cultural category within the UNESCO World Heritage site. In fact, this will be the first from northeastern states to be included in the UNESCO World Heritage site list from the cultural category. So you just remember this thing. And in fact, this Chairedio moidum embodies a deep spiritual belief, rich civilizational heritage, and even the rich architectural prowess of Assam's Thai Ahom community or Thai Ahom dynasty. And in fact, these moidums were nominated as India's official entry into the UNESCO list of World Heritage Site in the year 2023, and accordingly UNESCO has recognized them to become part of the UNESCO World Heritage list. And the next article that we are going to discuss is about the governors and how the office of the governor is being misused by the central government, or we can say the governors themselves, to subvert the federalism. That recently Supreme Court, a petition was filed in the Supreme Court that the governors have been misusing their powers. Governors have been deliberately not giving assent to the bills which were passed by the state legislative assemblies, and those instances that we have recently observed in Kerala and even Tamil Nadu also, and even to some extent in Telangana also, these instances have seen. So what are these instances? These instances where, in any state, to make if a bill is passed in the state legislative assembly, the bill to become an act, for that particular bill, governor should give his or her assent. But in this case, what has been happening? Bill is passed by the state legislative assembly, but even if the bill is passed by the state legislative assembly, the governor has not been giving assent to the bills, right? So that is the major issue where the bills never become laws. So therefore, because of that reason, Kerala government filed a petition in the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court also agreed to examine whether governors, by indefinitely sitting on crucial bills that were passed by the legislative assembly and sent to the governor for his assent, only to eventually refer them to the president. So in fact, when we talk about president solely acts as per the advice of the center, right? So president solely or only acts as per the advice of the center, or is it opening doors for union interference in legislative domain of states, thereby further subverting the federalism? Okay, so it is believed that governors have been indefinitely sitting on the bills. They are not giving their assent to the bills, and this would subvert federalism, because now its center has been, union government has been interfering in the legislative domain of these different states, thereby further subverting the federalism. Because when we talk about federalism, so there is a division of powers between the center and states, and now union government through the office of the governor has been interfering in the constitutionally guaranteed powers of the respective state governments, and that further leads to the subverting federalism, right? So a petition was filed by the Kerala state, which brought into the focus the role of the governor. So what is the constitutional role of the governor? Because in a state, governor is considered as a constitutional head. He is considered as a constitutional head, and governor also had a certain roles to perform. And in fact, Kerala also contended that the governor very often kept the bills passed by the state legislative assembly pending for more than 2 years before reserving around 7 bills for the consideration of the president. And in fact, Kerala state government also contends that the governor has no discretion, and it entirely depends on the aid and advice of the center. The president, when any bill is being reserved for the consent of the president, so president will not have any discretion. president also act as per the aid and advice of the central government, right? So that is where it is believed that the central government has been interfering in the functioning of the respective state governments through the office of the speaker. So such constitutional crisis that we have seen during 2023 with respect to states like Tamil Nadu and even Kerala. Right. So why governors have been withholding assent to the bills? Why the governors have not been giving assent to the bills? So when we talk about this, the Kerala state government has been arguing that the governor should actually return the bills for the reconsideration of the state legislative assembly. But instead of the governor kept those bills passed by the assembly pending, so he should return the bill for the reconsideration of the state legislative assembly. Now when we talk about the bills that the governor continuously or keep on pending with himself, included amendments to the state cooperative societies in Kerala and amendments to Lokayukta and even university laws, so that were made by the state legislative assembly. Okay, so it is generally said that the governor, instead of kept those bills pending with him, so he should return the bills to the state legislative assembly for reconsideration as soon as the bills were passed by the assembly and sent to him for his assent. And apart from that, the governor should also give his reasons for the objections and reasons for the sending or returning bills for the reconsideration of state legislative assembly, and that is what the Kerala state government has been contending in this particular petition. However, the interference of the governor in the functioning of the respective state governments, in the functioning of the state legislative assemblies, is actually viewed as the interference of the central government in the functioning of the state government. Okay, so because the center takes decisions on issues which exclusively coming within its ambit, right? Well, for example, now there are certain issues which are solely dealt by the state legislative assemblies. So those matters are solely decided by the state legislative assemblies, and constitution has guaranteed such powers to the state legislative assemblies. But now what has been happening here is that governor has been reserving the bills, and then governor sending those bills for the president, and president acting as per the aid and advice of the council of ministers or the central government. And that's where the central government has been controlling the state government legislative powers also. And in fact, governor's power to reserve a bill for the consideration of the president is a very, very limited. It is also a very, very narrow. It does not extend it to all the bills which were being passed by the state legislative assemblies. But despite the limited powers of the governor to reserve, or limited number of bills that the governor should reserve, for example, any bill which is being passed by the state legislative assembly, and if it threatens the existence of the state high court, so then that particular bill should be referred to the president by the governor. So therefore we can say that the governor's power to reserve a bill for the consideration of the president is very, very limited, and it is also confined to specific circumstances. So detailed in the provision of Article 213 of the Indian Constitution. However, what are the recent issues with respect to office of the governor? And with that we can also say that there is also a constitutional crisis that has been taken place. What are those recent issues? Governors are refusing to give a timely assent to the bills, right? So any bill to become an act in the state, that particular bill must be getting its assent from the governor, because governor is executive constitutional head at the state level. So but governors were refusing to give timely assent for the bills sent by the state legislature. And in fact, governors send many bills which are being passed by the state legislature for presidential assent. Okay, so governors actually send many bills passed by the state legislature for the presidential assent. So even the bills which usually does not require presidential assent, those bills also being referred very frequently by the governors to the president, and that would lead to the violation of the federal features which are being guaranteed, or a violation of the federalism which is being guaranteed by the Indian Constitution itself. So there are certain cases which actually deals with the office of the governor and governor violating the federal provisions. The first important case is Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case 2016. And in fact, in this particular case, the Supreme Court has found out that the governor has abused power in recommending president rule in state, right? So governor abused his office, governor abused his power, and governor declaring or recommending president's rule in the state of Bihar is considered as unconstitutional. It is against the constitutionally guaranteed powers to the governor. And Supreme Court has also said that the motivated and whimsical conduct of the governor is amenable to the judicial review also in the Rameshwar Prasad versus Union of India case 2006. And in fact, the court has also rightly said that a right person should be chosen as governors for maintaining the sanctity of the post, because this is a constitutional post, and apart from being a constitutional post, governor is considered as constitutional executive head at the state level. And in fact, the NCT of Delhi versus Union of India 2008 case, so Supreme Court has also made similar observations with respect to the office of governor. So in this case, Supreme Court has emphasized that there is a need to identify the moral values of the constitution, so which are being based on the notion of constitutional culture. So this is what the observation of the Supreme Court with respect to the office of the governor in two different cases. Okay, now what are the solutions that should be required to resolve the issues? Okay, so when we talk about the solutions, earlier there were number of committees on the center-state relations, and these committees have recommended certain suggestions with respect to the office of governor or reforms in the office of the governor, and most important commission was Sarkaria Commission report of 1988. And the Sarkaria Commission report of 1988 has recommended that the governor should be a detached figure. He should not belong to any political party, or he should not be in the active politics. That is what the Sarkaria Commission report has recommended, so that the governor can be neutral. And at the same time, he is not too intimately connected with the local politics of the respective state government, and that is very, very important to maintain neutrality and impartiality of the governor. And similarly, there was also another committee, that was Justice M.M. Poonchi Commission on Center-State Relations, and this committee has also made certain observations and suggested certain reforms in the office of governor. So it has said that to be able to discharge the constitutional obligations fairly with the impartiality, the governor should not be burdened with the positions and powers which are not envisaged by the constitution. Governor's role and responsibility should only be confined to the constitutional powers and functions. Whatever powers and functions which are granted to the governor by the constitution, the governor should be preoccupied with only those roles and responsibilities. He should not do anything which is not mentioned in the constitution. And in fact, an amendment to the Article 155 of the Indian Constitution regarding the appointment of the governor should be made. Okay, so that was also recommended by M.M. Poonchi Commission. So amendments in the Article 155 with respect to the appointment of the governor to essentially ensure that the governor will not intervene in the state politics, and governor is a neutral individual, and he is also work with impartiality. Whatever constitutionally guaranteed powers and functions, he delivers them with utmost sincerity. And apart from that, it has also recommended that the chief minister of the respective state must be consulted before the appointment of the governor by the central government. So third, so there is a need for a creation of an independent body for selecting governor, right? So there will be a panel of governors or panel of there should be a body, and that particular body would select the governors with a reasonably significant role for Chief Justice of India in that particular independent body. And apart from that, there is a need to legally prohibit a further rehabilitation of governors in official capacity, in any official capacity once they resign for the post of governor, right? So post-retirement benefits should also be curbed for these governors. And next important article is with respect to the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation. What is the context? The context is that India recently hosted the second BIMSTEC Foreign Minister Retreat Summit. And this particular summit has focused on certain areas including security, connectivity, trade and investment. So these are the key and focused areas of the second BIMSTEC Foreign Ministers Retreat. So these things will be focused in the Bay of Bengal region, because BIMSTEC as a grouping essentially deals with the countries in the Bay of Bengal region. And in fact, this particular retreat precedes a 6th BIMSTEC summit, and this 6th BIMSTEC summit is going to take place in September, where the leaders of the BIMSTEC grouping expected to sign a significant maritime transportation agreement among all these countries. And we'll talk about the potential of BIMSTEC. Now, BIMSTEC is a 7-member grouping, and these are the member countries which are part of the BIMSTEC, right? So it is the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, and these are certain objectives of the BIMSTEC grouping. Okay, so first and foremost thing that we need to talk about is a regional cooperation assessment within the BIMSTEC. So this retreat that was held in India was to review the regional cooperation among all the BIMSTEC countries. So particularly evaluating the progress with respect to the regional cooperation on different matters, right? So in fact, in this regional retreat, BIMSTEC retreat summit, India has also proposed establishment of centers of excellence in several sectors or several areas such as agriculture, disaster management and maritime transportation. So all these areas, cooperation in all these areas is very, very important among all BIMSTEC countries. And secondly, so India has also offered support to all BIMSTEC countries with respect to cancer research and treatment as well. And in fact, India is also even proposed that it is going to issue e-visas for the cancer patients so that they could get affordable treatment in India. And even Sri Lanka has suggested including kidney disease in the health collaboration. So in this recent BIMSTEC retreat summit. However, India and other BIMSTEC partners remain committed for the inclusive regional growth and development, right? So for that to achieve, India has been continuously emphasizing on the collaborative growth and even nurturing regional cooperation under India's policy of Act East. And even India has, flagship programs such as India's Act East policy and Neighborhood First policy. So India has been further engaging with all these BIMSTEC countries under both Act East policy and the Neighborhood First policy. So therefore, India has been showing commitment to address the regional challenges that all BIMSTEC countries have been facing from in the past years. And what will be the expectations from this BIMSTEC summit? There are a number of expectations from the BIMSTEC summit. So if you look at those expectations, right? So Sri Lanka has recently proposed a mapping of mineral resources and even integrating the production stages as well, right? So within BIMSTEC economies, Sri Lanka wanted to map the mineral resources, and it also wanted to integrate the production stages as well within among the BIMSTEC countries. So Bangladesh has emphasized on cooperation in the blue economy. So blue economy essentially means that fishing, maritime transportation, and mineral exploration, and coastal shipping, and improving the livelihoods of the fishermen. So everything comes part of the blue economy, and Bangladesh emphasized on the blue economy, and Sri Lanka has emphasized on the resource mapping and economic integration of all these BIMSTEC countries. And tourism is another area where all these countries have a lot of potential. All these countries are connected by common culture and heritage, and Bhutan has actually advocated for a greater collaboration in the area of tourism and even the cultural exchanges. And while on the other hand, Nepal has also proposed a whole of the region approach. So this whole of the region approach essentially emphasizes on enhancing synergy among all these countries' economies, and that particular synergy or integration is a very important for the cultural exchanges and exploring the existing tourist potential among all these countries. And all countries have expressed their concerns with respect to the non-traditional security aspects or non-traditional security concerns. For example, we need to talk about terrorism, militancy, insurgency. So these are non-traditional security concern. So Thailand actually highlighted that there is a need for the cooperation in the areas of non-traditional security areas, and Myanmar even added the need to address online scamming, and that should be taken as a priority. So these were the expectations from the BIMSTEC summit. However, the engagement of India with all these BIMSTEC countries would help us achieve its objectives in both its neighborhood first policy and Act East policy, along with the Sagar policy also, security and growth for all in the region policy. And next important article is with respect to the ASEAN is a cornerstone for India's Act East policy. So that was held by India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar. Right, so because he recently attended the ASEAN Post Ministerial Conference in Laos. Right, so we need to talk about that. So ASEAN, which is Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was the cornerstone of India's Act East policy and the overall Indo-Pacific vision of India. So India actually believes in free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. And in fact, External Affairs Minister Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar has also made some important observations regarding India's commitment to its Act East policy and the ASEAN inclusivity and its Indo-Pacific vision. So the current political, economic and security cooperation with ASEAN, so India's cooperation with ASEAN is actually the utmost priority for India. So is the people-to-people linkages. This cooperation along with the people-to-people linkages is a very important aspect for India, and India has also been constantly seeking to build on the existing ties and expand on the existing ties. And this year has also marked the decade of India's Act East policy. Okay, so this actually marks the decade of India's Act East policy, which was announced by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the year 2014. Right, so what is this Act East policy? Right, so earlier we used to have a Look East policy. For example, in order to further strengthen India's ties with all Southeast Asian and East Asian member countries, India has launched the Look East policy during the Narasimha Rao government. However, when Narendra Modi government came to power in the year 2014, Look East policy was changed and transformed into Act East policy, and this Act East policy is a more proactive engagement with all these East Asian and Southeast Asian countries by the Indian government. Right, so Act East policy was announced by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government in the year 2014, and it was an upgrade of the Look East policy that was announced by Narasimha Rao government in 1991. Right, so when we talk about the Act East policy, it is a diplomatic initiative. That this particular diplomatic initiative will actually promote the strategic and cultural relations with vast Asia Pacific region at different levels. Right, so there will be different areas that will be identified, and India will cooperate with all of these countries in these different areas. And in fact, so it also involves intensive and continuous engagement with all Southeast Asian countries in the field of connectivity, trade, culture, defense, people-to-people ties, bilateral, regional and at the multilateral levels. So this will be the essential and overall objective of Act East policy that the government of India has launched. Right, so what is the aim of the Act East policy? Right, so there will be certain areas, and India will engage with the all Southeast Asian and East Asian countries in those areas, particularly economic cooperation. So we will promote economic cooperation, and we have common culture, heritage, and therefore cultural ties will be further developed, and we will further strengthen the existing strategic relationship with all the countries which are located in Southeast Asia and East Asia. And we also have an Indo-Pacific vision. Right, these countries are actually strategically very important because they are located in the Indo-Pacific region, and we have Indo-Pacific vision. So therefore it envisions a more proactive and pragmatic approach of India, thereby improving the economic development in the Northeast region. so which is actually considered as a gateway for a Southeast Asian region. Okay, so that is the overall aim and objective of Act East policy, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much.